Okay, we have been going through the 1843 chart. Um, One thing I want to bring out right up top is I was reading this week in Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 4. And if you have yours handy, turn there to page 241, page 241, the tarrying time. And it says here in this first paragraph that when 1843 entirely passed away, unmarked by the advent of Jesus, those who had looked in faith for his appearing were for a time left in doubt and perplexity. But they had written a lot. They had put together this chart. They had studied through these things, Miller, for years, and determined that there was something profound that was to happen at the end of the 2520, the 2300 days, those two long prophecies. And so some hung on. Going on to the second paragraph, it says, their faith was greatly strengthened by the direct and forcible application of those scriptures which set forth a tarrying time. As early as 1842, the Spirit of God had moved upon Charles Fitch to devise the prophetic chart, which was generally regarded by Adventists as a fulfillment of the command given by the prophet Habakkuk to write the vision and make it plain on tables. Earlier, I think it was a couple weeks ago, we mentioned that J.V. Himes is the one that printed it, and we thought either Charles Fitch or Josiah Litch had made it. And it says here it was Charles Fitch. So wanted to bring that out first. The 1843 chart, we've gone through the image, which is Daniel 2, which was a rundown of the kingdoms that were to come after Assyria. And then we went into Daniel 7. And we have actually read to verse 8 of Daniel 7 and gone down through the lion, the bear, the leopard, and the Grisha, and then to pagan Rome and the 10 kingdoms and the 3 that were taken out of the way. Today we want to pick up, because that's not all God showed Daniel in chapter 7. So we want to take turns reading the rest of Daniel 7. And I want to bring out a few points here, but I want to move it along quickly because we need to get through Daniel 8 and then the rest of this chart today. That's my goal. Okay, so picking up and beginning to read verses 9 and 10. Do I have a volunteer? Go ahead. Don't forget to unmute.
Verses 9 and 10.
Yes, sir.
I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened.
Thank you. Donna, you want to read the next 2 verses, please?
Here, 11 and 12.
I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. And I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives are prolonged for a season and a time and time.
Thank you.
Nice, Daniel 7.
Another reader for 13 and 14? Cheryl? Daniel
Good
7,
morning.
13 and 14?
Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint, which spake, How long?
Daniel 7, 13. I saw in the night visions.
Oh, I'm on which? Okay.
You're on chapter 8.
I saw in the night vision, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed.
Okay. Thank you. And another reader for 15 and 16.
I, Daniel, was given in my spirit
Was grieved.
in the, pardon,
Grieved.
15.
Yes, he was grieved in his spirit.
I'm in Daniel 7:15,
Yes, please read.
and it says, I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the vision of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things.
Thank you, Joanne. I'll read 17 and 18. These great beasts, which are four kings. So he's flat out told these beasts represent kings or kingdoms, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. 19 and 20, someone?
Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows.
Okay. 21 and 22.
Go ahead.
Okay. Daniel 7,
21. Yes.
21. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days come, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom.
Thank you. And another reader for 23 and 24. I'll go ahead.
Thus,
Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and she shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. 25 and 26.
I'll
and
read.
he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the chains of the Most High. I think he changed times and laws, and they shall be given into his hands until a time and times and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end.
Amen. 27 and 28, Joanne, go ahead.
And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Hither is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my congregation much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my head, or in my heart.
Thank you. So here, as a quick rundown, because we don't want to spend a lot of time on it, these are power-packed verses, though, and they beg our deeper study. But we have here, after the rundown of verses 1 through 7 and the 4 kingdoms, then he is shown the judgment being set in 1844, after 1798. It comes right after that last kingdom. So here we have Daniel being shown, the books being opened before the God of the universe, the Ancient of Days he's called, and judgment, the investigative judgment. So then, after showing him a little piece of the investigative judgment and showing him the Son of Man being given the dominion forever and ever, Daniel's grieved in his spirit in the midst of his body, and the visions of his head troubled him. And he came near to the one that stood by and asked him the truth of all this. And so then he's told not more about that judgment and those books being going over, but he's told about these 4 kingdoms again in a little variation of it. And he's told that they will have power to stamp the residue with their feet, and a mouth that speaks great, very great things, that's more stout than his fellows, this last kingdom. And then once again, he's shown that this kingdom will continue until the Ancient of Days comes and judgment is given to the saints of the Most High. So then it ends up showing us that Daniel was so troubled with these visions that his countenance changed in him for a time, and he kept the matter in his heart. It disturbed him greatly. Now, if you remember, at the beginning of this chapter, chapter 7, this was in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. And so Daniel is given this after Nebuchadnezzar is no longer king, and his grandson is on the throne. And it's more, like we said last week, it's more information on what was given in that image. And so God is giving him more details, more details, more details. Why? Because Daniel wanted to see more. He kept pleading for more information. He wanted to know what was coming, what to expect. And God honored his prayers for wisdom on those things. So, the one thing I want to note here in chapter 7, 3 times, first in verse 8, then in verse 20, and in verse 25, we have the angel telling Daniel that this beast, terrible beast, this iron with iron teeth, would have a mouth that would speak great things. A mouth speaking very great things, it says in verse 20. And in verse 25, he shall speak great words against the Most High. So, 3 times we're told that this last image, or this last beast, would have a mouth speaking great things. How do we reconcile that with Scripture? What does that mean? Well, if we turn over to Mark 2, verse 7, Mark 2, verse 7. Do I have a reader for Mark 2, 7?
Why doth this man thus speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only?
So here, the Jewish rabbis are denouncing Jesus, not recognize him as the Son of God, and saying, why is he blaspheming? Why is he speaking great words as if he can forgive sins? Only God can do that. They did not want to recognize him as the Messiah, the one sent from God. And if we look again at Luke 5, 20 and 21. Do I have another reader? Luke 5, 20 and 21.
Okay. And when he saw their faith, he said unto him, Man, thy sins are forgiven thee. And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, Who is this which speaketh blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?
So again, here we see in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses that to speak great words is to pretend you can forgive sins. Jesus had a right. He was the Son of the living God. But here comes a power in Daniel that's diverse from the others, and he has a mouth that speaks very great things. Very great things. So this power says they can forgive sins. And so that kind of gives us a clue right here in Daniel of what that power will look like. And the other thing I wanted to bring out is in verses 18, 22, and 27. 3 times Daniel is told that the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. They will take the kingdom. That's a promise that is repeated from the angel 3 times. So that's very comforting for Daniel and for God's people. So we know that the papal power went strong for 1260 years. We have here, I guess we didn't finish this on the chart, and we'll look at Daniel 8 too, but on both sides of Jesus hanging on the cross, they have pagan Rome. First in its beast-like form, and then with its 10 heads and 10 crowns. So we'll get to that once we do chapter 8. Let's have somebody start reading, and let's read through chapter 8. Take 4 verses at a time, please, so we have less stops.
Your reference again?
Daniel 8, 1 through 4.
In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great.
Thank you. Now, before we read on, I want to have you notice that in the very first verse, it tells us this is the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign. So Daniel waited 2 years to get further information on what he was praying to see more of. Okay? Somebody want to read verses 5 through 8, please? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 through 9.
I'll do that. Okay. Sorry. And as I was considering, behold, and he goat, and he goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, and I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler and against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram that stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable, once towards the 4th wind, 4 winds of heaven. And out of the one of them that, how much are you on?
Yeah, verse 9.
And out of the one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land.
Thank you, Donna. Now, we have these depicted on the chart. Mark will show them to you. We have the ram that came with the 1 horn and just with fury ran into Medo-Persia and broke it to pieces. None could help him. And so Daniel is given a broader view of what was going to happen, which had not happened yet. And so here this rundown gets a little more intense, clear into Daniel 11, which gives us stories throughout history. Okay, somebody else. 10 through 14. Excuse me.
I'll read.
Okay.
And it was waxed great, even to the host of heaven. And it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stomped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself, even to the prince of the host.
Now this is the
And
little horn we're talking about that came up. Excuse me for interrupting, sister.
That's okay. And by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it passes and protests. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto the certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
Thank you. And that, as we have mentioned in the past, was the start text for the Advent movement. That at the end of those 2,300 days, the sanctuary would be cleansed. Okay, somebody want to read on for us, 15 through 18?
And it came to pass, when I, even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then, behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright.
Okay, thank you. And then Gabriel is going to become explicit. And I want to read these verses here. He said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest, having 2 horns, are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So who would that have been? The first king of Grecia. We have here 332, which is actually not, a lot of these middle column numbers are not prophetic numbers. They're just history numbers given us of when these conquests were done, that they have put in from history for us. So here we have 332, and it tells us who this horn that wiped out Medo Persia was. Can anybody tell me who that was? That was
Hey, Molly,
Alexander the Great. He came as a young man, just conquering everywhere he went. He left devastation, and he had control of it. And nobody could stand before him. And here the Lord tells Daniel, before it happened, this rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. So that was Alexander. But we know that at 32 years of age, he died drinking too much. He could conquer the world, but he couldn't conquer his passions. And so he died a miserable death. And that's depicted in the leopard as well, that had 4 heads and 4 wings. And then the goat over here in chapter 8, or the ram that had 4 horns. These are his generals. I've read in the past that he had a 5-year-old son, but the child had sickened and died, I believed. I could be wrong. It's been a long time since I looked at that. But his 4 generals took control and divided the empire amongst themselves. And God had already said it would happen that way. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding, dark sentences, shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And of course, this is the 4th kingdom, which is depicted as the legs of iron, taking over that and dissolving all of those 4 kingdoms into itself. Okay, number 25 through 27. Do I have a reader? Verses 25 to 27.
And though and through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the Prince of Peace, but he shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning, which was told, is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood it.
You know, as I read through that, 2 years before, when Daniel had the vision of chapter 7, he was troubled by it, but he didn't tell anyone. He kept it in his heart. And yet after he's told, shut up this vision, for it shall be for after many days, then he faints, and he becomes sick certain days. And when he rose up to do the king's business, he was still astonished at the vision, but none understood it. In other words, he told those of like mind in his little group there in Babylon about the vision, but nobody understood it.
Molly,
Yes.
in verse 24 and 25 there, and shall prosper and practice, and then also it refers to craft in verse 25. That's referring to witchcraft, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Prosper and practice. You know, I guess it's practice and prosper, I think. isn't it? That's in verse 12. And it practiced and prospered. That's what papal Rome did, and they practiced their witchcraft under a Christian guise. They pulled in paganism, and those who did not comply, they just killed. And
That's
that's
right.
how they prospered. That's how they prospered. If you don't believe just like us, then you don't have a right to live.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
actually interesting because it
go
mentions
ahead.
prospering and practicing twice in verse
Yes,
12 and in verse 24. So it's
yes.
kind of interesting that, you know, they
God's
must have
letting
been
Daniel
steeped in
know this
witchcraft.
thing is going to happen. This thing will happen. So here, like I said, in this middle column, we have Numbers, the taking away of the daily, 508. That's when pagan Rome, which had put Christ on the cross, the Jews could not crucify him. And so they went to what power to have them help him? Help them? They went to Rome. And Rome said, no, 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 no. We don't find any fault in this guy. We don't want to kill this man. He's innocent. And they said, his blood be upon us and our children. If you're of Jewish descent, please pray that that curse will be lifted from your shoulders. So it was pagan Rome that put Christ on the cross. And we have a lot of verses here, most of which we've already read. This here, 164, was the death of Antiochus Epiphanes, which many said was the man who stood up against the Prince of Princes. But it can't be, they say here, because he had been dead 164 years before Christ was put on the cross. So it was pagan Rome that answered to this description. And they have that here. Time of the league between the Jews and the Romans was 158 years before Christ, and that they got from Josephus' Antiquities, Volume 1, 13, Chapter 2, and Daniel 11:23, and also the Maccabees, 9th chapter. So
Hey,
we
Molly,
have, excuse me?
I'm sorry for interrupting. Just to comment on Antiochus, it couldn't be him anyway because he comes out of the third beast, not the fourth beast.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing that up. I had read that earlier this week and forgot about it. So, yes, he was from the third, not the fourth kingdom. So, then we have the division of Rome complete into 10 kingdoms in 490. And of course, 538 was when they took out the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths, who were Aryan nations. And I heard that all my life and never realized it was because they believed in the one true God and the only begotten Son of God instead of three gods, co-eternal, etc., etc. Same thing is happening today. If you don't take up the Trinity doctrine and call it the Godhead, then you will be annihilated, or they're planning on annihilation of those who take up that belief of one true God from the scriptures. So we have 538. These three kingdoms were done away with, those who believed in the one true God. So we've read about the horns, the one little horn that came up that spoke great things. And the reason it was different than all these other kingdoms, because all these other kingdoms were simply a political power. And then comes pagan Rome, and to hold its seat and its power, it becomes papal Rome. And it draws in, look here, we follow the scriptures, and if you don't follow us, we'll kill you. And so they brought in something totally contrary to the thinking of the other kings that ruled. The other kings just said, we want to conquer the world, and if you don't get out of the way, you're going to have to be dissolved into us and become part of our kingdom. Whereas papal Rome said, oh, we're the ones who forgive your sins. And if you don't do this, 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 and believe this, 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 then we'll burn you at the stake. We'll torture you. We'll hurt you. And this chart depicts um, that the fact that they didn't conquer and destroy all of God's people during that 1260 years, which terminated in 1798, it was because the the Mahometans arose, Revelation 9:7, and these locusts, these Mahometans, put a check on papal Rome here. They would move into a territory and just start taking over, and Rome was so busy fighting them back, fighting them back. In fact, in Luther's day, the Reformation got a good foothold because they were busy trying to push back the Ottoman Empire, get them back down, down, down into um, uh, past Egypt. They had come up through Palestine and were shedding out through the European countries, and they pushed them back down. So there's a lot of dates here. We're not going to take time to go over because we're very short of time. But this first, the fifth trumpet, this first woe, put a real hurt on Rome, so that the people who were God's faithful and true, that were hiding here and there in mountains, Waldensian mountains, and putting their life work into preserving the scriptures for after generations, were able to go on with their work yet a little longer. So, in talking about these trumpets and woes, I wanted to go to Miller's book that he talks in lecture 8 in the evidence from scripture and history of the second coming of Christ. You can actually find this on the E.G. White website under the pioneers. This is the year 1843, exhibited in a course of lectures by William Miller. And he says this in lecture 8. He starts out with Revelation 9:13, and he says, "And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, which are yet to sound." Now, I'm just going to read through what he states here about the other trumpets, and then the first couple paragraphs here I'll read to you. He says this: "In prophetic scripture, the sounding of trumpets is always used to denote the downfall of some empire, nation, or place, or some dreadful battle, which may decide the fate of empires and nations or places. At the fall of Jericho, the trumpet was the instrument in the hands of the priests of the mighty God of Jacob, which cast down her walls and destroyed the city." And then he goes on to talk about Gideon using trumpets to put the armies to flight in the middle of the night of the aliens. And the prophet Amos says, "Shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid?" Therefore, we may reasonably conclude, Miller says, that a trumpet is the harbinger of destructive wars and desolation of empires, states, or the earth, as the case may be. The 7 trumpets mentioned in Revelation, the 3 last of which are mentioned in our text, indicate the final overthrow of the power spoken of in the prophecy. The 4 firsts had their accomplishment in the destruction of the Jews and their dispersion in the fall of imperial Rome, in the overthrow of the Asiatic kingdom, and in the taking away of pagan rites and ceremonies. The last 3 trumpets will claim our attention in this discourse. The first four having their accomplishment under Rome pagan, to the last three under Rome papal. These three trumpets and three woes are a description of the judgments that God has sent and will send on this papal beast, the abomination of the whole earth. Therefore, we see the propriety of the language of our text, woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, meaning the worshippers of this papal beast, the followers of this abomination. The fifth trumpet alludes to the rise of the Turkish Empire under Ottoman at the downfall of the Saracens. Ottoman united under his government the four contending nations of Mahometans, which had long contended for the power during the reign of the Saracen Empire. The Saracens, the Tartans, the Arabs, and the Turks, these all being by profession Mahometans, were ready to follow any daring leader to conquer and drive out from Asia and even make excursions into Europe. All who professed the Christian faith, this Christian faith, which I don't call Christian, it's from a pagan source, papal Rome. That's what they were taking out. They, having embraced the errors of that fallen star, Muhammad, whose principles were promulgated by conquests and the sword, became one and perhaps the only barrier to the spread of the papal doctrine and power in the Eastern world. Here the Roman Church had long held a powerful sway over the minds and consciences of the Christian or Greek Church in the East by the aid of the Eastern Emperor at Constantinople. But the Turks or Ottomans, whom the Lord suffered to rise up in Bithynia, on or near the headwaters of the Euphrates, as a scourge against this papal abomination, now became a check to the Roman power. And from this time, we may reasonably date the declension of papal authority, therefore, on the sounding of the fifth trumpet. Now listen carefully, I've just got a few lines here. Rome papal began to show a weakness which in every succeeding age has been more and more manifested, until her civil power has crumbled to ruin, and her ecclesiastical assumptions must sink at the sounding of the seventh trump to rise no more forever. Excuse me. And I thought, how different his view of Rome. In 1798, she lost her power to be a persecuting power, and yet we hear today that she's going to rise huge and just destroy all Adventism all over the planet. But this chart ends with papal Rome being a persecuting power, and yet that's not what the scriptures and the original spirit of prophecy teach, or the 1850 chart that was put together by those who came into the third message. And I just want to read one quote for you here before we close from Spalding and McGann, Unpublished Testimonies, pages 1 and 2. This is a copy of one of 3 early visions. Excuse me. And it says this: I saw that we must wake up, wake, and cry earnestly for the arm of the Lord to be revealed. It is fatal to sleep now. Time is almost finished. I saw that it was a shame for us to refer to the scattering for examples to govern us now in the gathering time. For if God does no more for us now than he did then, we shall never be gathered. In the scattering, Israel was torn and smitten, but now God will bind up and heal them. I saw that God had stretched out his hand the second time to recover the remnant of his people. They are these who have been covered up in the rubbish since 1844. So there's a second gathering now. There was a gathering in 1844, and the second gathering is now at the end of time. I saw that efforts to spread the truth should now be put forth, such as in 1843 and 44. And then skipping down for lack of time, she says, I saw that the truth should be made plain upon tables, that the earth and the fullness thereof is the Lord's, and that necessary means should not be spared to make it plain. I saw that the old chart was directed by the Lord. She's speaking of this one, the 1843 one, because this was written in October 23 of 1850. I saw that the old chart was directed by the Lord, and that not a figure of it should be altered except by inspiration. I saw that the figures of the chart were as God would have them, and that his hand was over and hid a mistake in some of the figures so that none should see it till his hand was removed. And note, this was in October 23, 1850. And then they put out this 1850 chart. And this is the chart that I've gone by the most. And now I'm realizing, because that's the plan of God, to make it more plain and show where we really are in the stream of time. She goes on to say this, I saw that the two-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that his power was in his head. Who's the two-horned beast of Revelation 13, 11 to 18? It's the image of the papacy, the two lamb-like horns, republicanism and Protestantism. On this chart, we have papal Rome being the last persecuting power, which the Mohammedans were pushing against and keeping it squelched to help the people of God. Over here on the 1850 chart, we have the image beast, the apostate Protestantism and republicanism being the last persecuting power. That's what they understood in 1850. I saw the two-horned beast had a dragon's mouth, and that his power was in his head, and that the decree would go out of his mouth. Then I saw the mother of harlots, that the mother was not the daughters, but separate and distinct from them. She has had her day, and it is past. And her daughters, the Protestant sects, were the next to come on the stage and act out the same mind that the mother had when she persecuted the saints. I saw that as the mother has been declining in power, just like we just read from William Miller, as the mother has been declining in power, the daughters.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. We lost you there for a second. Sorry about that. I had a comment on the image of the beast. I think we all pretty know that the image is consists of the United States, right?
Yes.
But the image, it's pretty interesting if we look at politics lately. I mean, when I say lately, I mean in the last 10 years, and how many. Let's just take the Supreme Court, for instance, and look at how many Roman Catholic folk are on the Supreme Court now.
Oh.
I mean, one of the things that the image is going to do is it's going to reflect the policies of Rome.
Yes.
Correct? Because an image is a reflection of the thing that it's reflecting. So in that sense, it's going to reflect the policies and enforce the policies of Rome, which, if we want to break that down, I think humanism, secular humanism, is going to be a big thing here. Um, anyway, I just thought I'd make that
Yes.
comment.
Thank you. So she says here in this vision she had that she saw that the mother has been declining in power and her daughters have been growing. How have they been growing in power? With that image, like you say, a mirrored image. That's because of the Jesuits infiltrating all of Protestantism and inculcating all of their principles. I don't know how many know it, but if you have your name on a church books that has a 501c3, you have no constitutional rights in America. You have given them up. You're under a 501c3, which is under maritime law, which is Catholic canon law. So you're literally under Catholic law if you're in a nominal church. She says here, I saw the nominal church and the nominal Adventists, like Judas, would betray us to the Catholics to obtain their influence to come against the truth. The saints then will be an obscure people, little known to the Catholics, but the churches and the nominal Adventists who know of our faith and customs, for they hated us on account of the Sabbath, for they could not refute it, will betray the saints and report them to the Catholics as those who disregard the institutions of the people. That is, they keep the Sabbath and disregard Sunday. Then she says the Catholics bid the Protestants go forward and issue a decree that all who will not observe the first day of the week instead of the seventh shall be slain. So it's the Catholics saying, yes, do this, do this. She still doesn't have enough power. She's infiltrated these churches, taken over, but there's a few saints who are going against it. And so she urges the Catholics to do, or she urges the Protestants to do this thing and kill the saints. So this chart, we've just barely skimmed through a lot of this, but hopefully it will help you not be so afraid to look it up online and to study it deeper, what it means. And what it shows us is that most of this is past, and we are down in the very toenails of this image, ready for the last great movements to happen, which are happening. All of them are happening. So the 1850 chart we will go over next time, and I think it'll probably take us 2 Sabbaths to get through it as well. Although we could move along more quickly because its basic information is taken from this one. God builds on the foundation. He doesn't give us other truth off of the foundation. What's here on the 1843, a lot of it has been moved to the 1850, but then the third angel's message is added to the first two, and they are giving us a rundown of the end time events more carefully. So, any comments? You got your hand up again, Trevor.
Yeah, I had a couple comments on the 501c3. Some folks don't know that when you become a 501c3, you become a corporation,
Yes.
and your assets, like let's say the Seventh-day Adventist Church, for instance, the General Conference, they are a 501c3 corporation. And under President Bush, all 501c3s were made government entities. In other words, they have to obey federal law in regards to hiring and firing and so on and so forth. This is how you're seeing a lot of things happen in the Seventh-day Adventist General Conference Church,
like lesbian pastors.
The mainstream church, like with homosexual pastors and things of that nature being hired, because if they don't, they'll dissolve the 501c3 corporation and they'll take away all their assets.
Yes.
So they're under the thumb of the government to do exactly what the government tells them, And if they don't, the government will just dissolve the corporation and they will take away everything the church owns, including hospitals, church facilities, vehicles, all assets will be taken and they will redistribute the assets in accordance to the court that decides where the assets should go. Now, as you said, the flag with the gold trim around it denotes a maritime court, and it's not subject to constitutional law.
Nope.
It's subject to whatever the judge says. So basically, just as on a ship, the captain has the final say of whatever happens on that ship. In a maritime court, that judge has final rule and can basically dictate whatever he wishes. So if the Seventh-day Adventist Church or any church that's a 501c3 goes against federal policy, and that goes with, that means everything.
Yes.
Then they are dissolved. They are taken away. And that's what would happen. And that, yeah, you never want to get involved in a 501c3.
Nope. Definitely not. And one 501c3 can sue another. And it's very frightening in that if you read the bylaws of a 501c3, if and when they do go down, every single one whose name is written on their charter, they can come and confiscate your house, your cars, your land, everything you've got, and put you in servitude until your part of that bill is paid. So it's wide sweeping. People don't understand what the churches are all about. I don't know if you heard Mark, but he says there's a reason God calls us to go ye out to meet him. You don't leave the church because somebody didn't like your casserole you brought to potluck and made a fit about it. You go out because God said, go ye out to meet him. He's not in that corporate body. So let us kneel for prayer. Father in heaven, we come before you today praising you that you foresaw the future and you warned your people of what is coming. We thank you for this 1843 chart and that you have placed it there for us to learn by, that we might draw close to you in these end times. We thank you and bless you today for your goodness to us and for your help. In Jesus' name, amen.